Good afternoon. I'm Steve Rubel. I'm Executive Vice President, Global Strategy and Insights for Edelman, the world's largest public relations firm. I'm based in New York. Thank you very much for coming today, and thank you for all of you who are watching the live stream of this exciting event brought to you by News Limited on the future of journalism. I want to kind of set up with a thought, and then we'll have a discussion about this and other topics about the future of journalism. So in my role with Edelman, what I do is I spend a lot of time with the media companies and also with the social networks and also with our clients, trying to figure out, like all of you, what does journalism look like? How is that going to evolve, and how is that going to affect us as readers and consumers of news, as well as creators and curators? And through different conversations I've had with different folks in academia and, as I mentioned, on the media side, I've come up with a point of view. And this is going to be part of the discussion today. Increasingly, I think that there's what Dr. Henry Jenkins at USC Annenberg School in Los Angeles talks about, two planes of media. There's spreadable media, and where news finds us everywhere. And then when we want to know more about a topic, there's drillable media, where we actually want to go and find information that we are passionate about and want to know about in more depth. And I'm actually wondering, and again, this is more of a question than an answer, if a divide is forming, if there's a real difference, if not all news is equal, if there is some news that finds us that we snack on that are more like maybe potato chips, and then there are more substantive meals that we go and we seek out from authoritative sources of all different kinds that are more substantive, like a 4-course meal. And I've noticed that part of that dynamic has been changed by the digitally native media, the media that have no legacy, are new. And they seem to be really good at blending journalism and community management to make sure that news finds you. And they leverage Twitter, Facebook, and to some degree Google to make that happen. But then there's also quality, kind of drillable content media that you go seek out that you may use Amazon to find. You might use Apple to find that from the App Store, or go directly to a web source. And I actually think that might be content that increasingly you may want to pay for, because it is more, it offers more value than the spreadable content. So with that, I'd like to have a discussion with my panel and about these and other topics about the future of journalism. And so I'd like to call up the panel. And I'd like you also all to participate. The Twitter hashtag is Herald Sun FOJ, Herald Sun FOJ, for the future of journalism. So I'd like to introduce my esteemed panelists here. Starting at the end, Phil Gardner, Editor-in-Chief, Herald and Weekly Times. As Editor-in-Chief, Phil Gardner's role is to look after the Herald Sun, the Weekly Times, and free daily commuter publication MX. Phil makes decisions about the papers under his direction and their online counterparts, including what goes on the front page. He arrived in Australia from South Africa in 1985 and has worked on News Limited mastheads, including Sun News Pictorial, the Sunday Mail in Adelaide, and was the founding editor of MX Melbourne. Sitting next to him is Renee Barnes, journalism lecturer at RMIT University. Before becoming a lecturer, she worked as a journalist for a number of organizations, including The Age, ABC Melbourne, and Australian Associated Press. On behalf of the MEAA, Renee works with journalists to help them better understand the social web. Her PhD is on what motivates people to participate on online news sites and how people engage with news and media. Next to her is Russel Howcroft, who's CEO of Australia and New Zealand at Young and Rubicam. He's an acclaimed advertising veteran with more than 20 years industry experience in the UK, USA, and Australia. He's a panelist on the popular ABC TV show, The Gruen Transfer, and of course, he loves Australian rules football. Who doesn't? Is there anybody who doesn't?
I just need to point out, I didn't write acclaimed advertising veteran. I don't know who the hell wrote that. Trevor?
I think PR people wrote it. And finally, last but not least, sitting next to me is Campbell Reid, who's Group Editorial Director of News Limited. He's Editorial Director for all mastheads that come under the News Limited brand, which include the Herald Sun, the Daily Telegraph, the Australian, Adelaide Advertiser, and the Courier Mail. So thank you very much for being here today. So I'd like to start by kind of asking you, do you agree or disagree with the hypothesis that there will be kind of news that finds you and versus news you seek out, and there'll be a difference in that? And I'd like to get your reaction to that. Maybe I'll start with you, Campbell.
Sure, thanks, Steve. Yeah, look, I think it's absolutely, it's not an emerging trend or something that's going to happen. It has happened, and you know, I think I heard a phrase similar to that from somebody who appeared to me very well informed, and yet I knew that they hadn't been anywhere near what we would call a traditional news media, newspaper or radio station or TV bulletin for a long time, and yet for the things that they were interested in, news was finding them all the time, and it's an extraordinary challenge for us, because it's not that long ago that if you wanted the news, you had to make an appointment with it, either be in front of your TV at 6 o'clock or beside your radio every hour on the hour or buying a newspaper. And it's a massive challenge for us, but not one that is means that we are sort of completely challenged by it, because I think the other side of it, the drillable news, the news that you can actually, news will find you, but does understanding and insight and expertise find you? Probably not. You have to find that, and that's our opportunity.
Look, I actually see it as an opportunity. News that finds us, we have to, as in the mainstream media companies such as Herald Sun, we have to use those sorts of emerging media to drive people to our so-called traditional sites. I mean, we have, at the Herald Sun, we have vast amount of our reporters are now all on Facebook, they're all on Twitter, and I think the way we can utilise their skills on Twitter is absolutely when they write a story, when they're breaking a story, when they've got something to say in the newspaper or on the M site or on the iPad, is to drive readers who possibly aren't traditional newspaper readers or traditional media users in the classical sense, from their Twitter accounts into places where they will get that drillable, rich, engaging content.
I don't know.
I agree. The only thing I would say with that, though, is that I think drillable news is also spreadable. And I think the key is, if we're writing or producing good quality journalism that's in-depth journalism, and our audience appreciates that, they'll spread that for us. They'll share that with their friends and networks, and that's what we want them to do.
The issue, though, is about, it's about advertising. Yeah, journalists don't have a job unless there is advertising revenue coming in the door. And one of the things which I think is interesting about these discussions is, first and foremost, are the media companies creating an advertiser platform? Are they first and foremost thinking, this is a great platform for advertisers, therefore I'm going to attract revenue because it's great for advertisers. On the back of that, I can get some journalists writing some articles. So I think it's really interesting, if you go back to the late 1800s, that in the newspapers, at the front of the book was the ads. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So first and foremost, they were there to drive commerce, buyers and sellers at the front of the newspaper. Then at the back of the newspaper, of course, was the journalists. Then, of course, over 100 years, the journalists win the argument. They say, no, we're more important than the advertisers, therefore we'll go to the front of the book and you can go to the back of the book. Yeah? It's the wrong way around. The advertisers, the metaphor, the advertisers should be at the front of the book. First and foremost, why is Google what Google is? It's an advertiser platform. It matches buyers and sellers. That's why it's the biggest media beast in the world right now. And sometimes I think I get confused around the future of journalism discussion. It's about what are the advertiser platforms that we're creating that are going to keep us journalists employed.
If it's all about eyeballs on ads, though, if that's the case, you need an audience there to see that.
Sure.
Yeah.
And does the audience just want a front book full of ads?
No,
Are you saying they don't value that journalist content?
No, they do value it. They absolutely do. But in terms of thinking about how to think about the future of journalism, sometimes I wonder whether the question, are we creating an advertiser platform, is asked.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I answer that?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, he wants to say something. He's jumping a bit.
Look, if you look at the evolution of the newspaper as a product, and my acclaimed veteran is absolutely right.
Acclaimed veteran.
I call you that forever now. The AV. And that's true. The Times of London was classifieds on the front page. Advertising was the news. In the early days of newspapers in Australia, the news on the front was the notices of which ship was arriving next, and the journalism followed. But over the centuries, newspapers have evolved into this. It's a hand-in-hand walk between the journalism and the content, and the connection that the two create this toolkit for your life. I often talk about a newspaper in its, it's a Saturday morning printed form on your front lawn, is an indispensable guide to every single choice that you need to make, whether you're going to buy a car, go to the supermarket, what you're going to buy at the supermarket, what horse you're going to back, what TV station you're going to watch, and what politician to trust. It's this massive collection of information that guide the choices you make in your life. And the point that I think when newspapers were, some of them were called a river of gold, it was easy for journalists to treat the advertising with some disdain, and that's not part of our life. Yeah. I think where we are as an industry now is we are moving from administering and putting out newspapers, as we've always done, to developing what is the new content offering that people are going to engage with. And unless we have advertising and journalism in the conversation right from the word go, we're frankly...
But let me, if I could just double click into this discussion for a second. The advertisers are creating more content than ever. So do you feel like you still need the media?
Do we still need... It's interesting, isn't it? Because when you think about the future of our business, you can imagine a future which is zero media expenditure, where the content that you create is so engaging and so powerful that the consumer will go to it, and therefore you don't need the media platform in order for it to exist. Yet you can project that place, which of course is really interesting for the content provider, or the advertising agency, commercial content provider. That's an interesting thing for us to think about. It's a future which will probably happen to a point. Yeah, I can't imagine it absolutely being the case.
So, Campbell, Phil, does that excite you or does that worry you?
No, well, I think it doesn't worry me because it won't work. Because the relationship, newspaper journalism and newspapers are the only platform where advertising is welcomed and is sought out and is not there that in a way that it is avoided by people who are buying the information. So, newspapers that have advertising are much more valued by their readers than newspapers that don't have advertising, because the two things walk hand in hand. Yeah. And it's a dance between credibility and trust and a relationship, and both the high quality advertising and high quality information in a package together equals a great relationship. So I think as long as we keep our part of the bargain of keeping connected and engaged people with trusted information, then frankly it's better for the advertising customers who are reaching exactly the same group of people that we still walk hand in hand.
So part of the media's bargain is providing numbers, as in viewers, readers, volume. That's part of the bargain. And one of the things which I think is interesting, snacking versus four-course meal. Four-course meal is obviously you're asking people to buy the four-course meal. Snacking, I'm imagining, is free.
Well, you can get you might get a three-course meal for free sometimes.
Yeah, okay.
Snacking is always, Everything has a cost.
Okay,
right?
so therefore
there's a psychological cost.
That's right. Okay, so then the subscription, so let's say for the 4-course meal I've got to pay, that's going to reduce the numbers and therefore reduce the attractiveness to the advertiser.
On the numbers, I want to ask a question of Phil. What role does or should analytics play in the newsroom? I know that, like in some media companies, their writers have access to a full analytics suite that's in real time, and even though it doesn't compromise their news judgment, there's no doubt that analytics plays a role in what they write about, and they know they write a story about a certain celebrity, they write a story about a certain company, it gets sometimes 5x the traffic of a story that's about something that's should be maybe have more news value.
Look, I think analytics has got to play a very, very big role in what we do. It has to play a larger role, and ongoing it's got to become central to what we do when we're producing content for our newspapers, our M sites, or whatever. Understanding what the reader wants and understanding what is driving their behaviour is central to everything we do. I mean, it's no good in us as journalists, and we are sometimes the worst at this. You know, we always sort of sit around and say, well, that was a really good story, and we say, well, who thinks so? Well, we do. Well, hang on, what do the consumers think? What do our readers think? And we have got to understand better what the readers do. Television does it very, very well. News directors, program directors can have up-to-date, hour by hour, minute by minute on their desk how programs are tracking. Newspapers have got to get into that sphere where we absolutely understand, particularly with our move into the digital sphere, what our people are reading, at what time of the day, and why. And in doing so, you can build a relationship with your readers, you can build relationships with your advertisers, you can drive readers to these to your websites or M sites at particular parts of the day. So I would say absolutely vital, and it's what I would call one of those 21st century roles that has to embed themselves in just about every newsroom in Australia.
Renee, you studied how people interact with news and the impact. There's no doubt journalists are people too, right? They're not robots. So, and they arguably get a certain psychological and social lift from certain kinds of stories over others. They may get a reaction over that. Mm-hmm. So do you think that over time journalists will be able to maintain their integrity and write a balance of stories that they should write versus what they could write that gets them social recognition and significant numbers of retweets?
Yeah, I absolutely do. I think the premise in your question there is that the audience is stupid, that they only just want trashy content, and I don't believe that's true. So if you're talking about the integrity of the journalist, the in-depth, the quality journalism, then I certainly do think the audience wants that. And it's not to say that that type of content won't get the hits, and I'm sure Phil can address that question as well, more in terms of the actual content that you're using, but it's not to say that that content isn't wanted. I don't agree with that at all.
So will the audience then be, what do you think then the right balance is between, snacking, media that you snack on and media that you actually consume? Like if you had let's just say you have 3 hours a day to spend with media. What do you think, do you think society will rationalize that properly, or do you think it'll be unbalanced? I mean, if you look at it, like I think it's like diet. There's a lot of us who eat a lot of unhealthy stuff all the time, and we don't need our broccoli all the time. We should. So I'm curious if it'll.
Well, I guess it's how you package that 3-course meal, isn't it?
Right.
So how are you addressing your audience with it? How are you telling them that it's just as valuable to them as the potato chips? They'll get as much enjoyment, perhaps, as the potato chips, to continue that analogy. You need the chef's hat content. Show them value in that content, and they'll want that content.
Right.
I think it just gets back to what does the audience want, and what do they want at a particular time of the day or particular day of the week. For instance, in Melbourne at the weekend, obviously it's football in winter. That's what people want to read about.
But how do you balance what they want versus what they need?
Who are we to tell them what they need?
Yeah.
Well, you have analytics to tell you what they want. So does journalism over time become something that is more catering to what people want versus what they need to know?
Look, I think this is a balance that we live in every day, and you know, there's not a politician in the world who, when their misdemeanours or their policy missteps is on the front page, doesn't reach for the, oh, you're just trying to sell newspapers. And political stories don't sell newspapers. We know that forever. In fact, we have some newspapers that say, we aren't putting politics on page one because it never sells. No matter what you guys get up to, it doesn't sell. And yet, yeah, the TV guide still sells.
Yeah.
But, you know, so that mantra, whenever you hear somebody, oh, you're just doing that to sell newspapers, they, A, don't know what they're talking about, B, they've got something to hide, and C, they're probably a scoundrel in the first place. Because it's not true. The things that they think sell newspapers don't, but we still run them. So why do we do that? Because we think it's important, and it's part of that broader contract that we have with society to say, across 365 days a year, hundreds of years in a row, we keep that contract to keep you informed about the administration of society. And so to go take to torture the three-course meal thing, it's about going to a restaurant that you've been to for years and you know you trust the food there. And that's, again, that's what helps keep the connection with both the community and the advertisers. So,
that's what I think. I think it must be terrifying to be in your business. That every single day you have to fill a book. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be full of wants and needs, I've got to tell you, yeah? Because, you know, you just... And you just got to fill this book up. I mean, it must, quite literally, it must be terrifying. You wake up every day and say, my God, what am I going to do for tomorrow? So you can probably analyse it all you like, but
we rely on you guys to fill half.
Yeah, well, exactly, I know. I know that. And then the public relations guy is another 80%. Exactly. Anyway, it must just be terrifying, that's all.
It can be occasionally.
Yeah.
So Russell, I want to ask you a question. As there's more moving towards a digital pass, for example, like the Herald Sun has done,
Yep.
does the value of a reader change to you? Is a reader who pays for content more valuable to you than a reader who does not pay for content? Is every page you treated equal? Is every person treated equal?
There will be an accurate answer to that question. I'm not a media buyer, so I don't know the accurate answer. But my sense of it is a reader is a reader, and if they're reading a page in MX, which by the way I think is outstanding, if they're reading it, and probably undervalued, yeah. If they're reading a page in that, that's a page for a reader that you just give those eyeballs a value. I don't see the difference in a Herald Sun, which I've had to pay for. It's the eyeballs the same, I would have thought.
But you can get more data and demographics and analytics potentially on the subscribers.
Indeed, and so we therefore say that they've got more value because we can have a relationship with them. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Nonetheless, I'm a sort of remain a high impact sort of guy, and I like the fact that when I get my newspaper out, it's been Financial Review recently. They seem to be doing very well getting full-page press ads. I don't know if you've noticed that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The impact that the full page is able to create on the reader, I think, is outstanding. Old media, I know. No data that you're getting from that reader. I also know that. But goodness me, an outstanding smack over the head that the advertiser is giving the reader.
So I'm curious how you see social networks. Do you view them? Anybody who wants to jump in here, are you nervous about what they will steer people to? Do you kind of craft the story differently based on the ups and downs of different social networks? I'm curious how the role of the social networks in the newsroom today and going forward.
I'll start. I don't think anybody really knows where this is going, and I think we have our knowledge of how to use social media for our journalists and our industry's advantage is really just emerging. You know, when people started, our own staff started being on Facebook and tweeting, we were we're still wrestling with, is a journalist tweeting out of the public gallery in Canberra is that to our benefit? Is it to their benefit? Who's extracting value from that conversation? But increasingly, as we start to learn about these things, and I think the New York Times is leading the way in this with their paid content model, of using social media to create a personality beyond the grey lady of the printed product into a vibrant participant in social media, either through its own masthead or through the voices of its journalists. I think it can be a really powerful conversation.
I think, just to amplify on Campbell's point, intuitively, we are taking very, very big baby steps of, what is a 10,000 kilometre run and counting, but intuitively, social media needs to be our ally. I have a view that if you're not in that space and you're not actively engaging with people who use social media, you're missing out and you can't reach into new audiences. It's up to us to find the best way of utilising social media to engage in new readers and bringing our content to our readers, telling them about it and informing them when they want to hear about it at a time and choosing of their place.
I think it's, if I may, I think it's really interesting for media companies to think about, let's define ourselves as being in the social media business. I actually don't know what that means, by the way, but in 5 years, News Limited is a social media company. Yeah, because I completely agree with you. I mean, it is another media platform, obviously. It's really worth having a look at. I'm sure all the audience here would have had a look at Facebook's most recent awards. So Facebook is now awarding advertisers for using their media platform best. Yeah. So what's now happened, and happened pretty much last year, and of course it's accelerating every day, is Facebook now is an advertiser platform. And it is a brilliant advertiser platform. So again, it's evidence, right, that this thing doesn't exist. Facebook doesn't exist unless it's advertiser friendly. It's now becoming advertiser friendly. It's creating very creative platforms. The most recent Bonds campaign, which has been produced, fantastic use of Facebook. So therefore, I can imagine, the big media companies in the end defining themselves as social media companies, not, if you like, media companies. Just chuck that out there.
On that, I think Facebook does have a section where it deals specifically with journalism. So there's a person's job at Facebook who is the journalism manager. So that's Facebook recognising...
Great guy named Vadim. His name is Vadim Laverson.
Yes, yes.
And he goes with every journalist and shows them how to use the subscribe feature.
So that's Facebook recognising the power of media.
They're saying that... They're a media company.
But they're also recognising that there's a role for legacy media in that space as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Renee, I want to ask you a question. There's a book in the United States that is generating a fair bit of chatter called The Information Diet that you may have seen. And the author basically says that every individual needs to take responsibility for how they consume content. And one of the things he suggests is that, that people actually make appointments to schedule when they will engage with media. Otherwise, it will fill every pocket of your day. So how much responsibility does there need to be from the audience in how they engage media versus on the media?
There's actually an awful lot of research that's out there at the moment that has spoken to the audience to ask them what they think about this concept. And what we're seeing is a change in their perception of their role in the news process, if you like. They see it as one step, perhaps going to the newspaper website and reading that content, but they actually see it as their responsibility to find out more about that. So they just see it as one part in a web of information collection. So from reading that newspaper, they might then go to Google and find something more about what that topic was, go onto Facebook, chat with their friends about that. So it is showing that they actually see they have a responsibility in this process as well. It's
a good marketing idea, though, isn't it? In that you have to, that you try and create a moment in the day that you will consume that media. Yeah. So that's good marketing by someone in order to get. I only watch the 6 o'clock news at 6 o'clock, right? It's appointment viewing. So you promote it at 6 o'clock, so I'll watch it at 6 o'clock. So that can be the case for all media, if you like. It's smart. Market it as, your 4 p.m. snack, and guess what? People will consume it at 4 p.m. Sounds like an astute marketing idea to me.
So Phil or Campbell, either one of you, in the United States, a lot of the media companies are getting really excited about the tablets and the e-readers. And they're going through and they're recognizing that their archival content has value, unlocked value that they hadn't realized before. So, for example, when Steve Jobs died, Fortune magazine went and they packaged up the 5 or 10 best articles that they wrote about Steve over the last 20 years, and they put it out as a $2 downloadable or $5, whatever it was, downloadable ebook. So I think a lot of media companies are getting very excited about their archival content and recognizing it has unlocked value. And I'm curious if you've explored that and what you've thought about that.
I think Phil is.
We're absolutely exploring it, and I think that's just part of the value offering that we want to give our readers going forward. It's a huge part of what we want to do, unquestionably.
Great. I think the emerging e-book idea is really exciting because it we sort of our archival use historically has been a bit ponderous about 60 years of the Queen, and wouldn't you know it, we have pictures going back 60 years and here they are in a lift out. It kind of makes you feel good. But to turn archives like the Steve Jobs example into an active part of a running event is really exciting. And I'm always intrigued with the gulf between the things that a newspaper has the space to publish and the things that a newspaper actually knows. And what we know is immense. And for the first time in history, we have the opportunity to unlock it. Really.
So question comes in on Twitter from Jim Stewart, whoever wants to jump in here. Why don't newspapers sell extra products like property guides, employment guides, etc.? They have all the content. So why not kind of repack, content can be chopped up in lots of different ways, and this is just a few examples. So any thoughts on that particular topic?
We do, in that,
okay.
The Saturday Age and the Saturday Sydney Morning Herald and our Courier Mail, circulation doubles on a Saturday courtesy of the real estate and advertising job that advertising and cars advertising, so we kind of do. But I think it is an interesting question. It goes to Russell's point earlier. As we go into the future, what is our bespoke, newly created for the new world product that brings a pillar of advertising and a pillar of content and useful information together and takes it to market in a new way? And those traditional pillars of advertising, cars, jobs, houses, we've got to go there, in hand in hand.
So all these new models for journalism, I'm curious what you think, any of you, the opportunities will create for marketers. Will there be more opportunities? Will it be? How much does that keep you up at night, or any of you? Renee, I'm curious also if you have a perspective on the public's view of advising in this future.
Gosh, that's a massive question. I think I want to direct that to Russell.
How will this benefit the advertiser?
Oh, look, I think from where I sit, it wasn't that long ago when in the advertising community there wasn't a single problem in the world that couldn't be solved by a 30-second television commercial. And now the opportunities for advertising to get their message out is at least as extraordinary as it is for journalism. And I think I think both of us should be lying awake at night thinking how lucky we are to be right here, right now in the industries that we're in.
I think the opportunity exists, and there's some great examples in Melbourne where you can get a specific message out to a specific subset of readers. For instance, the Herald Sun has a very, very good, very strong and powerful relationship with the Transport Accident Commission, the TAC, surrounding our Supercoach football fantasy game. And that is absolutely a benefit to the Herald Sun and our Supercoach game, and to the TAC, because the TAC understands who plays Supercoach, understands the demographics, and tailors an advertising campaign specifically around the people who play our game. So it's a win-win situation, and that's the kind of opportunities going forward, whereas, you'll still get your sort of mass market advertising, for want of a better word, but increasingly the opportunities for advertisers to target key segments of our readership, of our newspapers, of our digital platforms, and hone in on that and get really high value out of it. It's just ad infinitum.
I love the use of mass market media, Phil. That's the thing that I worry about. because there was a certain wonder in the mass media, mass consumer, mass advertising model. Beautiful, really, wasn't it? It was simple. You generated mass demand. It was actually cheap to advertise in large mass media. It didn't cost you very much money, on a per-person basis. And I do get concerned around us not thinking about mass anymore. I know we've all got very excited about fractured and integrated and small media and engagement and one-to-one. I still think that mass media and the creation by you guys of mass numbers is really important.
But you get my point being you can have both. You can have sort of the higher road, which is the mass market, and very much a key structured look at a key demographic.
Yeah.
Do you think the audience is more sophisticated now, though? So that mass message where you just tried to hit as many people as possible as an advertiser just doesn't work anymore?
No, it works. Absolutely works. It works. There's case studies week in, week out of mass media working incredibly successfully. I mean, the best mass media users these days in Australia are, of course, the retailers. They recognise the reach that mass media provides and therefore is incredibly efficient because of their stores and their footprint, etc. So they're the best at it, and they prove week in, week out the power of mass media and what it can do for their businesses. There is increasingly less, if you like, mainstream brands that use mass media, and I think that in time they will regret it.
So a question about how we prepare the future journalists of the world. Les Poston asked me, it says, to kind of ask how much of courses today should cover social media, and Renee, particularly you, what portion are you, how much is social media part of the curriculum now?
It's definitely part of the curriculum. It can't be. If we're preparing the future journalists, then we need to be looking at not only what is the industry doing now, but we're actually in a very difficult position because we have to answer that question, what will the industry be doing in the future? And all of the evidence is showing us that it's really going towards a social media future. So it is a huge part of our...
And what kind of skills are you looking for now that you weren't looking for before?
Look, I think the question should be broader than that. Is social media is but one part of the new skill sets our younger journalists, and in fact all our journalists are going to need. It's part of a wider range of skill sets they're going to need, to meet the challenges of publishing on multi-platforms with different tools. Being able to write, being able to film, being able to edit, etc. So, absolutely training people in social media journalism and effectively using social media to their benefit is important, but is part of a wider discussion that needs to happen. And we have recognised at the Herald and Weekly Times, we've instituted a new training scheme for our trainees, and we are bringing these sorts of disciplines into our program because we absolutely recognise that this is the way of the future.
What may be interesting for the audience is that our advertising agency in New York, and we have done it with one person in Melbourne, we're looking to employ journalists, looking to employ graduates from journalism school, which goes right back to the original thing around content.
More journalists are finding work inside agencies and corporations.
Yeah.
We're seeing that
in the States.
In the US,
yeah.
Absolutely. Questions from folks here who are joining us live? Any questions from anyone here? Just raise your hand. There's two folks running around with mics. Okay. We got one right there. Always the first one. Takes time.
Just a quick question on the personalities we were talking about before with social media, and obviously a lot of our journalists, I'm a Herald Sun employee, my name is Matt, and you'll see a lot of our journalists are now embracing social media and all sorts of stuff. With the, I suppose, balance of their personality and their commitment to the Herald Sun brand, where does the 24-hour, 7-day-a-week clock stop for a journalist in the future of journalism? Like it seems now more than ever you're always having to try and put your brand out there and contribute. So
just to repeat the question maybe for the live stream, the question was around kind of personal brands in journalism and when you kind of stop the clock on that. But I'm interested in that overall topic, which is, how do you view, the rise of personal branding in journalism, and also the other side is the work-life balance issue. Where does that kind of start and stop?
As an outsider, I think the Herald Sun journalists have done a fantastic job in being active in the Twitter space. I think in particular the sports and the footy journalists that are in there, they're active all of the time, and what they're doing there is they're not only helping the Herald Sun brand, I believe, but their own brand. So when you're asking then the audience to come and pay for their analysis, for their investigations, the audience feels like they've already got a relationship with those journalists. I think they're doing a really good job of that, and I think the benefits will flow on from that.
I think the readers would relate. You know, if you use the football example, they would relate very strongly with something like Mark Robinson or John Ralph. It's all about the relationships that the readers have with particular writers. That's why Mike Sheehan was such an extraordinary phenomenon in Australian sports journalism. He had a relationship, if you like, with all 1.3 million Herald Sun readers. So I think that is really, really important. Obviously, you know, the relationship with the brand, but also the relationship that you have with your readers. Andrew Bolt's another one, Terry McCrann, Susie O'Brien on the Herald Sun have very, very, very strong relationships. And, you know, our readers feel like they're actually talking to Robbo or Susie or Bolter.
Just on the work-life balance, there's no such thing.
There's no such thing.
No such thing. Yeah, to even think there is you're in crazy town. Go and live in Nimbin.
Well, if I could challenge that for a second, I mean, that maybe in the media business that's not true. Maybe in the advertising and marketing business that's not true. You know, but there's a lot of people they do.
Okay, so they're in the industry that's appropriate to their.
In other industries, I think that sometimes we have a limited view of that.
Okay, fair enough.
I mean, look, you know, in the U.S. we're particularly.
But you live in New York, the city that never sleeps, but everybody in New York sleeps a bit.
But we.
They don't work on it. They don't work on a Friday afternoon in summer.
We don't work on Friday afternoon in the summer.
Yeah.
Okay. Come to Madison Avenue.
Okay, all right.
I invite you anytime to come between the last 2 weeks of August, maybe.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
so
but the rest of the summer, come visit me in mid-July.
All right, okay.
But I think it's been
So it's true in the last 2 weeks of August.
there is a notion though that if you have one of the devices that every single one of us has in your hand, you are at work, or you have the ability to be at work at the drop of a hat. So I think the thing for a journalist is to understand, as we are increasingly understanding, what consumers are going to be using their device for at a certain point in time. So, you know, there's no point in being awake 24 hours a day tweeting about a story that you know that the majority of your readers are going to, as their habits evolve, as we are learning that they evolve, you might not need to do that story until 10 o'clock the next morning, because that's when your biggest audience or most engagement is going to be there. So it's, I don't think we have to be a slave to it, but we have to understand when our stuff is of value and get it out at that time.
It must be very exciting for great headline writers. Twitter must be very exciting for them. You know, it's back to, you know, just the power of that subhead that gets the reader in. Yeah. You know, great creative opportunity.
Yeah. But writing for social media is different than writing for.
Is it different for a tweet?
Writing for print, I think.
Twitter,
beyond just the structure of it, right?
Oh, Twitter's just a headline, then I click through to read the story.
It's all about the ultimate goal, and what you're wanting people to do is to click through.
Yeah.
When content that gets shared is very different than just content, right? Those things are very different. I mean, I'm curious what you guys think about what's happening with this. You heard about a company called BuzzFeed in the United States. They have a BuzzFeed, very interesting model. Their model is curate the best videos from around the web, you know, from all different kinds of sources. So if you want to kind of see the zeitgeist of videos on the web, they're a great place to go. Okay, and they've built their success that way. What they've done, though, is they're starting to move into news. So they built out a politics channel. They hired the best writer from one of the best writers from Politico. They hired a writer from Gizmodo to start a tech channel, and they hired a writer from New York Magazine to start a women in culture channel. Right. So, and when I went and met with them, I said, "How are you going to break into news?" And they said they're taking an emotionally intelligent way to look at news, and they're writing content not just for news value, but to get it shared. I said, "What do you mean?" Well, when they cover politics, they'll do a slideshow of candidates showing thumbs up, as opposed to writing the day in, day out of the campaign. So I'm wondering what you think of that model, and if you think that more news in the future might be written to be shared as opposed to be consumed.
Oh, I think absolutely. And I think that balance between traditional journalism of, you know, we talk about it all the time, of going from a lecture to a conversation, and people have conversations with other people about things that make them, that have an emotional connection as well as an intelligent connection, and it's something that we are starting to really put all of our journalism to a test is, well, what emotions is that triggering in the audience, not just, do you need to
rational
know that
versus
stuff?
emotional,
Absolutely.
right?
Terribly
There's that
important.
balance that you have to walk every day.
Yeah.
There's a question in the audience here.
Thank you. Thanks very much for an enlightening discussion so far. I'm a journalist and an educator in public relations, and I was interested in the comment that so much of what's generated in the news comes from those in strategic or professional communications. I think we heard up to 80% sometimes. And a number of students are here and would probably be interested to hear what you think about that role that strategic communicators, professional communicators have to play in this new arena as well.
And when you say strategic communication, you mean PR people?
Yeah,
Okay,
we're interchangeable.
That's a very nice way to call PR people. Thank you.
That's what they like to be
called. On behalf
called.
of the profession, we thank you. Role of PR people. Role of PR content.
Look, I think, and I might have a differing view to lots of people in the journalism fraternity who wring their hands about the bombard of press releases and the fact that, some politicians sort of package up video of their day and they feed it to small country town newspapers and people run it. And the challenge is not for the PR people to sort of suddenly stop bothering us with all this stuff. It's for us to assess it for its value and to test it like we do with any kind of information that we get. And I think it's kind of a weak-kneed excuse of journalists, people in my positions or educators to sort of wring their hands about the insidious way that the PR is infiltrating our newspapers. And if we do publish newspapers that are 80% PR content, well then more fool us. But if you're a company or an organisation, gee, News Limited's hosting an event, it's hosted by a PR person. So why wouldn't we do that? We're having a message, we need to have an event, we need to get our stories straight and out into the community. It's up to journalists to test that information and to challenge it and accept it or reject it as the way they do any information.
Phil, does social media disintermediate PR people?
Sorry?
Does social media make PR people less relevant?
Not especially. I mean, I think, the PR people are going to use social media to get their message out like everybody else. I mean, to carry on what Campbell said, I think, a lot of the tension around PR companies is largely as a result of lazy journalists not fulfilling their obligations and testing information contained within press releases, video releases, whatever. So I would say, the content that comes from PR companies should be treated the same way as the content that comes from football clubs, politicians, the police, everybody else. Information that needs to be tested, and journalists make their own assessments as to its news value or not.
I think one of the great things about a change in journalism to embrace the audience more and to invite them into the process is the idea that the audience will always know more than the journalists. As a collective whole, they know more. So that actually mediates some of that as well, by taking them as part of the process.
So Alistair on Twitter asked good questions about kind of the shifting role between opinion makers towards that of content curators. So I'm interested in talking about curation. Big buzzword right now. In the States, we have a lot of journalists using platforms like Storify, which are just tremendous, where you can go and you can curate 1 million different tweets from a breaking news event like today. You can go through and you can go through all the questions under Herald Sun, FOJ, and the best tweets and curate them into a news story. So where do you see journalists as content curators, advertisers as content curators? I'm curious where you see curation filling in. Is it a buzzword or is it a real thing?
Well, from an advertiser point of view, what we now talk about is platforms, not campaigns. So when we present to a client these days, we will be saying it's not about the campaign you're going to run in August. It will be about the platform that we wish to build for them, which will have a digital role. It'll have a Facebook role, have a website role, a social media role, and then we will talk about the curation of that platform. So that's the ongoing. Obviously curation, but it's the ongoing employment of an individual who is managing the content of that platform. That's a whole new world, yeah, and that has come about, I suppose, in the last 2 years. Now, when we present to clients It's very rare now that we'll say, here is your print campaign. Yeah, it'll be about the platform that we wish to create, which will involve curation.
So I think from a journalism point of view, that word, you know, a museum curator, what does he do? He looks after the exhibits. And in a way, curation in the journalism sense is exactly the same. You have a story, how do we manage that, the life of that story, the engagement of that story, and how it's engaged with as we move it around from print to online to social media and so forth. That's curation in one sense. The other sense of curation, as it's come to, is cut and paste everybody else's good work and pretend it's yours, which, you know, good luck with that. But it throws the challenge at us to that, you know, the people in this room who are going to have a profession in journalism, journalism's real or professional journalism's task is to be generating the pieces of information, the creative information that the world is either interested in or needs to know, that other people are going to cut and paste. If we are the cut and pasters, we're out of the business.
I haven't heard the word video mentioned much.
You haven't asked us a question.
Well, but that's fair. It's always the moderator's fault. You know, how do you? What is a newspaper now? Is it? Can you really define a newspaper when there's video? And I mean, in the United States, WSJ Live is a very successful model for the Wall Street Journal. You know, the Huffington Post is going to launch a 12-hour day streaming network in this summer. So, what's the role of video in the future of journalism? Where is it today, and where does it need to go? And
well, I think it's a very, very big part of our ongoing strategy. I've seen figures that show that in the coming years, 92% of the internet will be used by people watching video. Now, a lot of that's going to be time-shifting TV programs, but that's an extraordinary figure, and it's our job to sort of capture some of those eyeballs, just a fraction of those eyeballs, if you like, and create content on our websites that will engage these readers. And I always see video, you know, it's not going to replace the written word per se. What video should always do is add value to a written story that's on the internet. So, you know, you would have a story of, say, the leadership tensions in the Labor Party that appears on the website. You would have an accompanying video to go with that. That's possibly a backgrounder, or it's an analysis, or it's a scene set of what's going on. Video always needs to be used, in my opinion, to enhance the reader experience on whatever platform they're using. And that is the challenge for us as editors, to get that right. Because, you know, to your point, you know, the reader, the consumer, very, very smart, and they will spot a dead duck a mile off, and they will quickly shift from one media company to the other if they perceive the video as just being of very, very low value.
If I could add to that, I think one of the most exciting things about presenting journalism on the online medium is that we're not hemmed in by one medium anymore. It's not that as a newspaper journalist, I've only got text to tell this story. Actually, you can look at what is going to best tell this story. Is it video? Is it text? Is it audio? All of those options are available to you. And that's a better experience at the end of the day for the reader, viewer, whatever they might be on the net.
we're in the home stretch, so last call for questions on Twitter, Herald Sun, FOJ, but first here in the audience. Are there any questions in the audience? There's one over here.
I'm not used to your microphone. I want to follow up on the point you just made, because a lot of this discussion seems to be around about what's going to happen now, next year, and the year after. So if we take a bunch of kids who have entered school this year, they're 5 years old. So by the time they hit newspaper buying stage, I don't even think there'll be newspapers. Will we still be seeing, I think rather than the question being the future of journalism, is there a future for the written word in the newspaper as it exists online?
You mean a physical format or?
No, not so much the physical format, the online format. You talked about video as extra content. You could do more with it. Do we think that we'll see a shift away from the written journalism to becoming more of a news reportage?
So, related to that, I think you could also buckle in the rise of infographics. So,
yeah.
You know, are we going to going to see less readers and more glancers?
Look, I think I want to know, and I'm currently reading this, God knows why I'm just Damascus, this fantastic book called, some of you have read it, the Jerusalem, a biography. It's this massive thing, it's like the white pages. And I'm reading it at night, and it's a great, because it's something to read and it's a workout, just holding the bloody thing up. And yet, I'm sitting there and I've got an iPad beside my bed, and I'm not reading a book on that. I love reading books, and people have loved reading books forever, and books and has survived, reading has survived movies and radio and television. And so a great piece of writing can move people to tears. A great piece of video can move you to tears as well. So I don't see that this is a wrestle for dominance between one platform and another. I think in the students that you were talking about will have storytelling techniques and ways to present them that combine moving pictures, infographics, and great writing in a way that we've never seen before.
So last question, because we have 2 minutes left. Loyalty. Great question from James Fetz, or Fetties. I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name. If he is, I'm sorry if I did. He asked about loyalty and whether or not there's a perceived lack of loyalty from audiences towards online outlets. How much does loyalty keep the two of you up at night? How much are you concerned about loyalty and where you put your money and how? And obviously, what is the future of loyalty in terms of the social discourse? I'm interested. So, any thoughts on loyalty, brand loyalty?
Yeah, well, that's what it's all about.
For you, it's a big.
It's about the brand.
Right.
I mean, that's clearly what it's all about. And if I may, I'm not sure that the media companies work hard at brand development. And the creation of loyalty and the creation of passion. If you're passionate about media brand X, then it doesn't really matter what outlet it uses. It doesn't matter whether it's TV, radio, print, video, online, Twitter, doesn't matter. It's their passion for the brand is really important. I think we all know that. I just don't know that we work really hard at the creation. I mean, have we all seen the latest Guardian commercial? Yeah? If you haven't seen it, two-minute commercial for The Guardian about the pigs and the wolf blow the house down. It is sensational. It is pure advertising beauty, and it will generate wonderful sense, feeling, emotion towards the Guardian brand. They're investing in that brand, and they, of course, have been brilliant at letting that brand, at creating different content, different platforms around the Guardian brand. It's outstanding.
So we have to cut off the live stream. Leave it to the advertiser to get the last word in. As always,
Last in break.
It's brought to you by. But thank you very much for following the live stream. You can go back and read all the tweets at Future of Journalism. If you go to futureofjournalism.com.au, you can see the tweets as well as the video from this discussion. And thank you to our live audience as well. And thank you to my panelists.
Thank you.